record button 2 here. So just so you know, Sadeqa too, and Janet, this is the recording that we're doing right now will be on Facebook for, ever, as long as Facebook's around, but it'll also be on our YouTube channel. So you can go out and share that link as well. So I'm going to give Facebook a minute or two just to do its notification and let people know that we're here and that we're live. So I'll fill a little bit of airtime talking about Warwick's. It was in the green room with Sadeqa and Janet, and Sadeqa used to be a publicity a long time ago and used to send authors to us. So we appreciate that very much. And so it's so great to be able to actually host her.
Yes.
Even virtually, it's great.
It is. It is. I remember when I was a publicist sending authors to Warwick's, and we get this rush because I knew it was such an institution. So to be on this side of the table is like amazing.
I love it. Well, thank you. And we're so glad that both of you are here. And I was telling Sadeqa in the green room that we're actually celebrating this year our 125th anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah. So while we're not the oldest bookstore in the country, we are the oldest continuously family-owned bookstore. So Nancy's great-grandfather started this in 1896 back in Minnesota, and moved to, we're actually now in La Jolla, which is just the little tick outside of San Diego, California. So if you have a feeling we have people from all over the world here watching, because Janet's calling in from Paris and Sadeqa's calling in from Virginia. So we've got the whole swath of all kinds of places covered. But if you happen to be in the San Diego area, we would love to see you. We're going to be doing a celebration for the 125th, like in November. We're hoping that things will be opened up and we can actually gather in bigger groups than just a few. But I also wanted to mention real quick, this Saturday is Independent Bookstore Day. So if you are anywhere near an independent bookstore, everybody's been wonderful supporting all of us through the pandemic, but we still need lots of support, and this is a good day to celebrate. So if you're anywhere near, out and about, visit a bookstore. We'd love to see you at Warwick's. For today, we're going to have Sadeqa and Janet are going to talk for about 30-ish minutes. But if you have questions, go ahead and put those into the comment section, and I'll bring those into their conversation after they're done. So at about that 35 minute mark. And I'll also be putting both Yellow Wife and the Paris Library into the comment section with links there. Like I always say, anywhere there is to get a book, you can get it from Warwick. So real easy to click that link and we ship it right to you. Or if you'd like to come pick it up, you would love to have you come to the store. So I think I've given Facebook enough time to let everybody know that we are here. So let me do my due diligence and get the show on the road, as they say. So Sadeqa Johnson is the internationally best-selling author of 4 novels. Her accolades include being the recipient of the National Book Club Award, the Phyllis Wheatley Award, and the USA Best Book Award for Best Fiction. She is a Kimbilio Fellow. Is that right, Kimbilio? Is that how you say it?
Kimbilio.
I always say I feel like I'm the Norm Crosby of this. It's like my pronunciations of things is just sometimes I have to really check on that. Kimbilio Fellow, a former board member of the James River Writers and a tall poppy writer. Originally from Philadelphia, she currently lives near Richmond, Virginia with her husband and 3 children. She's here today to talk about her latest book, Yellow Wife. Wait, let me see. Yellow Wife. You've got there we go. Love it. I wore my yellow today for you. Which was one of O Magazine's most anticipated books of 2021. With her today is Janet Skeslien Charles. Janet is the award-winning author of Moonlit in Odessa and the New York Times bestseller and Indie #1 pick, The Paris Library. Her shorter work has appeared in reviews such as Slice and Montana Noir. She learned about the history of the American Library in Paris while working there as the program's manager. She divides her time between Montana and Paris. With that, ladies, have a great conversation, and we'll see you in about a half hour.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. All right, Sadeqa. Well, it's so great to see you. And I have a lot of questions about the book. So I'll go ahead and get started. To me, first and foremost, Yellow Wife is a book about the power of hope. And what really struck me about the main character was her courage and her hope. We first see Phoebe as a teen, and she has a budding romance with a young man. She has a mother who loves her and has sheltered her and taught her. But then Phoebe's life takes many unexpected turns. We see her alone. We see her navigate a difficult relationship with a man, and we see her care for her young children. We see her reunited with someone from her past. And Phoebe says, as long as there was breath, there was hope. Can you talk about your hopes for Phoebe and how hope sees us through dark times?
Hmm. As long as there is breath, there is hope. So that line really, mm, it really touches me because I think when I think back to when I was doing the research for Yellow Wife, a lot of the circumstances for the enslaved people were, I mean, the odds were stacked against them. The story of Phoebe is inspired by Mary Lumpkin, and she is a woman who has been blotted from our history. And my hope was to give her a voice, to give a voice to those who didn't have a voice. When I learned of her story, it said that she was married to the owner of the jail, Robert Lumpkin, and that he was mean and he was a bully and he was vindictive, but to her, he was compassionate and took care of their children together. And I couldn't stop wondering what it was like for her. What was it like for her on a daily basis? So when I think about that line, I think about Maya Angelou. I think about her poem "Still I Rise," and she says, "I am the hope and the dream of the slaves. I rise, I rise, I rise." And that was what I was hoping for Phoebe as I was moving her through the story. Yes, she had to go through very difficult moments in the story, but I always saw her just kind of navigating and finding her way. She had a lot of suffering, she had a lot of sacrifices, but she also was resilient. And if there's one thing that I want for people to take away from the character of Phoebe is that, you can do anything. And I felt that as I was working with her, the things that she had to overcome and the difficult situations she had to get herself out of. It let me know as a person that if she can do it in her circumstances, I could surely do anything that I put my mind to.
Okay, oh, that's wonderful. Until this book, I had never heard the term yellow wife before. Will you tell us what it means? And did the title come to you right away when you started working on the novel, or did it come to you later? And did you have any other thoughts on the title?
So, Yellow Wife for me came when I was doing my research. I was researching that the actual jail is called the Lumpkins Jail, and it was a punishing center for enslaved people. Between 1844 and 1865, over 200,000 enslaved people had passed through this institution. And the families were separated, they were tortured, they were abused. It was such a horrible place that masters who lived in the area would send their slaves to the Lumpkins jail to be made an example of. So, so Robert Lumpkins, that was what he did. He was known as the devil. He was known as the bully. When I came across some information on him, I saw a small glimpse of his will. And in his will, he said, "I leave my fortune and my real estate to my yellow wife." And he was referring to Mary Lumpkins, who in my story would be Phoebe, Dolores Brown. And then he said, "I leave some other things to my Black concubine, who would then be Sissy in my story." And so that was the way he divided his women, his yellow wife and his Black concubine. And so when I read that, I thought, wow, that's a beautiful way to describe the story as a whole. And I'm always open that my titles might not stick. It's usually kind of my working title, and then it gets to my agent, and then it gets to the editor. But I'm always open. And for some reason, all four of my titles have always stuck.
Nice,
Yes.
nice. Phoebe has a very challenging life because she's neither here nor there. She's neither a free woman, nor is she exactly enslaved. She is caught in between and must walk an incredibly tight line. She tells her first love, "My bruises might not look like yours, but they are there." Can you talk about those challenges Phoebe faced in that line she had to walk?
Yeah. So Phoebe grew up, she's 17 when the story opens. She is the daughter of the master of the plantation, along with his favorite slave, Ruth. She's been educated by the master's sister, Miss Sally. She never had children. She never got married because she was ill. And so she takes Phoebe on as a pet. And so she teaches her to read and to write and to play piano. And her whole entire life has been built on the theory that when she turns 18, she's going to be free. The master's going to free her. He has promised her mother he's going to send her to a school in Massachusetts. She thinks that she's going to move there and live happily ever after with her true love, Essex Henry. Well, a series of events take place, and Phoebe not only does not see this promise fulfilled, she is thrust into the bowels of slavery, and she finds herself at this jail. And she catches the eye of the jailer. So right off the top of the story, you know, she has this feeling that her life is going to be magical and that things are going to work out for her. And it's almost like she's hit by a car, you know, she's in a situation where she doesn't have any power. She has no agency over her life, but yet every day she makes those very difficult decisions, even if trouble may come. You know, she's the type of person who I like to say can make a dollar out of 15 cents because she's very resourceful. She knows how to insert herself in certain situations so that she can appear to be useful, so that she can sort of get her way. But she doesn't have a lot of agency. And as we move through the story with Phoebe, we see that one moment we're rooting for her and we feel like she is making strides, and then something will happen that will knock her right back down. But she keeps getting up. She's a fighter. She just keeps getting up.
In this book, we see the power of music. And for Phoebe, it's an escape and it's an outlet for her feelings. And one of the few times in the book when she feels lost, she expresses it by saying, "I could not locate a single song inside me." That's such a beautiful line. Can you talk about the music inside Phoebe and what music represents for her?
Yeah. So music really colors everything that I do when it comes to my writing. So every scene, every section of the book almost has its own soundtrack. So when I was writing Phoebe's sections, I was always listening to piano music, particularly piano players in the 1800s, because I felt like they would give me that sense of who she was. When I was writing the scenes from the church, I was able to locate Negro spirituals that were sung in the 1800s. I went onto the Library of Congress and they had little snippets of different songs. And so I would listen to those songs as I was writing those scenes so that the music would seep into the story. So it's almost like it all kind of works for me. It's like I drop into this portal and I'm working on this character, and then the music kind of pushes me forward, and it's like the words and the music kind of mix together to create what you see on the page. I knew that when Phoebe, I didn't know she was going to be a piano player from the beginning. Actually, when I was first working on her, the piano came a little bit later, but I took piano lessons as a kid, and because I love music, I always wish it was something that I would have stuck with. I have a 13-year-old daughter who plays piano now. She wants to quit. And I'm like, please don't quit. Trust me, when you become an adult, you're going to be so glad that you stuck with it. And so that was something that I had given to Phoebe, but it also was her way of escaping, because her mother always told her, you are a slave in name, but never in your mind, child. So in her mind, she had to be free. She had to know that she had the power to escape, if only in her mind. And as she played the piano, you know, and there's a lot of scenes where she plays it and it releases her, it takes some of the pain away, it grounds her, it centers her. And so music was really her way to freedom in a space that was not free.
Absolutely, absolutely. Can you tell me what details or part of her personality came to you first?
I knew she was young. She actually, when she first came, she almost felt too young. That first voice that I heard of her felt like she was maybe 14 or 15. And I thought, I need her to be a little bit older because I wanted that 18 to be the
Mhm.
number. So she came to me really young. The very first scene that I saw Phoebe was she and her mother were in the loom house and she was falling asleep. And her mother was whispering her recipes to her, how to cure dropsy and what to do when people caught a fever and lockjaw and all of those those ailments that they felt in the 1800s, her mother, being the medicine woman and the herbalist, knew how to cure those. And so it was a form of storytelling. It was a form of her passing this story down to her daughter. And Phoebe took it all in as if it was a lullaby. Her mother's remedies is what lulled her to sleep. And so that was my very first glimpse of Phoebe, was the relationship with her and her mother. I always loved to write about love. So when Essex came into the story, it makes my heart jump when I'm writing about two people who are in love. I enjoy it, and I know people who read books love it. The relationship between the master and his wife, all of that took a little bit of time for me to kind of figure out. I always think about when I'm writing a book, sometimes I feel like I have all these beautiful Christmas tree ornaments, but I don't have the tree, so I have the Christmas tree ornaments, but it's the tree that I'm missing. And so I have to figure out how to assemble the tree so that I can string these beautiful ornaments onto the story to make it all make sense. And so that's what I had to do with Phoebe. I write in 3 parts. And so I knew part 1 was going to be on the plantation. I knew part 2 was going to be, at the jail. I wasn't quite sure what part 3 was going to be, but I figured it would work itself out as I started to make my way through the story. So, yeah.
When I read the book at first, I was very nervous about Phoebe because there was that promise that when she turned 18, she would be able to go north. And I wasn't sure if the master was sincere with that promise. In your mind, was he sincere from the beginning, or was there ever any doubt?
So I came across that promise a lot in my research, and that it was a common promise, particularly when the master was involved with the mother of the children. My opinion is that they used that as a way to keep the mother in line. She would do whatever he said if the promise of freedom was there for her children. A lot of times, those promises were not fulfilled. I didn't know if the master was going to free Phoebe or not. Um, but if I had to guess, I would say that he was also using it to keep Ruth in line, and that he wanted her to kind of do what he wanted her to do with this promise because he knew she would do anything for her child. So yeah, that was something I came across a lot. Unfortunately, it was not usually a promise that was fulfilled.
Yeah, yeah, that's terrible. In this, if our books have a common theme, going from music to books, it is that both books underline the power of literature and the importance of stories. Phoebe loves to read, and it is an escape for her. And she's able to pass on her love of reading to her daughters, but not her son. We see that reading is dangerous, and a woman is whipped for it. Can you describe the situation of the enslaved at that time?
Yeah, so reading was against the law. Reading and writing was against the law. Any form of education was against the law. So when Phoebe learned how to read, it was because the master sister taught her, but even her mother was afraid for her. There's a scene where Phoebe had to hide her pens and hide her paper and hide her diary because if the overseer ever came to the loom house and discovered that she could read and write, there could be grave danger for her. So even when she's trying to teach her son, she does it in a corner in the back of the stables, very, very quietly. So there is a lot of danger. It was a way to keep the enslaved people in their place. If you hold back the education, you hold back that sense of an uprisal, that sense of we should be free. So that was another way that they controlled the enslaved people, was to keep them from reading. And so Phoebe understood the danger of it, particularly when she witnessed the scene of the woman. But it was still as important to her to make sure that her children were educated as it was for her mother to make sure that she would one day see freedom.
That scene was chilling, and just as chilling to me was the promise of the master, because you have such hope for your characters. We really fall in love for your characters. We really want the best for Phoebe, and we just don't know what will happen. And I just think you did such a wonderful job of portraying that line she had to walk, and her passions, and the way the way she just fought every day it's just so amazing. She saw a lot of women pass through her house, and she interviews them as quickly as she can, and she writes down their stories. And it is her way of helping people who can't be helped. Can you talk about her bravery in doing this?
Yeah, that came to me. It wasn't anything I'd planned. Someone asked me this question last night, like, when did the diary appear in the story? And I don't really remember. It was just there. I know it wasn't one of those Christmas tree ornaments that I had from the beginning, but it just, you understand when things just kind of appear, right? And
Mhm.
so I remember the diary just appearing. And then it was like, well, what are we going to do with this diary? So when she realized that she was a part of moving these mulatto women further down south, it was nothing she could do. She had no agency. She could not stop the movement. She could not stop them being separated from their family and being sent someplace that they had no idea of. And so what she thought was, the one thing I could do is remember them. The same way her mother was teaching her about the herbs and the medicine, she thought, the one thing I can do to preserve their memory is to say that they were here. And so she used that opportunity to get as much information as she could, and she put it down on paper.
I spent about 10 years researching World War II, and though I didn't realize it at the time, the dark history and the front row seat of what man will do to his fellow man really got to me. And Phoebe and her children in this book go through very difficult times as well. And I wonder how you balance writing about one of the darkest times in US history with your everyday life. How did this story take a toll on you? And were you able to separate the research that you did from the rest of your life? And well, I'll start there. I have so many
So,
questions.
yes, I love it. So when I first discovered Yellow Wife, I was a contemporary fiction writer. So my first three novels are all contemporary fiction, and I had no intention of writing historical fiction. I loved reading pre-Civil War books. I read Jubilee by Margaret Walker, and The Kitchen House by Kathleen Grisham, and Winch by Dolan Perkins Valdez. And those were books that I loved, but I never thought that I was capable. I thought it was a skill set that I just did not have. So when I discovered the story of Mary Lumpkins, my family and I were on the Richmond slave trail in 2016. And that's when we read The Marker and we learned about the Lumpkins jail and Mary Lumpkins. But we also skipped ahead to the end of the trail where we stopped at the African burial ground. And during this time period, when the slaves died, there was no ceremony for them. So they literally just waited for the bodies to pile up, and then they dumped them in the ground. And so when we went to this sacred burial ground, that was the spot where they had been buried. And we could feel this energy. This energy was so strong that my friend started to pretend as if he was playing the drums, the African drums, and the children started to move. And it felt like it was this sort of like coming home moment happening. And I thought, my gosh, the ancestors were waiting for us. They were waiting for us. And then my next thought was, oh, the ancestors were waiting for me. They wanted me to tell their story. And that was both exhilarating and scary all in the same moment. So I went home and I'm just researching. I'm not committing to telling the story. I'm just researching. And it got to the point where I was so caught up, it was all I can think about. And I had a friend who came over to the house and she asked me what I was working on. And I'm telling her and I'm saying, but I'm so afraid. And she said, the thing that scares you most is what you're supposed to be working on next. And that just opened the window for me to say, why don't I just give it a try? So I just threw myself into the research. I visited different plantations. I went to the Library of Virginia. I started a picture wall so that I could kind of visualize what it was like for them moving during this time period in 1850. I read a lot of books by enslaved people, which really gave me the language and the day-to-day feel of what it was like for them. Sometimes when you're reading history books, there's a little bit of a film there that you can't kind of penetrate, but when it's from their own voices and their own experiences, it's a deeper level. And it was very deep. It was it hurt sometimes,
Yeah.
it was hard to write some of these scenes, but it was important for me to tell the truth as I had understood it. and to not sugarcoat the experience. So every time I had to write a difficult scene, for me, it was almost like an honor. Like I was honoring people who didn't have a voice. Without me, their story wouldn't be told. And so I wanted to do it to the best of my ability. So I didn't shy away from those difficult moments. To take care of myself, though, it was difficult because I was with this book for 3 years. And I remember being on, the beach reading Booker T. Washington's autobiography while everybody else was reading, fluffy beach reads, but I had to stay immersed in the story. I usually write in the mornings. So that gives me the opportunity to write, get it out of my system. Then I'll go for a run or a hike or some sort of physical activity to get the story out of my body so that I can go on with the rest of my day and be present for my children and cook dinner and that sort of thing. And I also try and give myself off on the weekends, particularly when I work really hard, just so that the mind, the body, everything can just settle and be ready to go to work on Monday. I try and treat it the same way people who go to the office, they take the weekends off. I also try and take the weekends off just to give myself that little bit of a separation.
Okay. I was wondering, were there surprises in your research? Did you think something would be one way, but in fact it was another?
I was really surprised by that community of mulatto women with the jailers. That dinner scene where the other jailers come and they bring their mulatto wives, I didn't know that that existed. And what I found out in my research was that the men who ran these slave jails, these slave pens, and the traders, they were looked at as the pariahs of society. And so no well-off white man would marry his daughter to a man like that. So the next best thing for them was to marry a mulatto woman and have children that can then pass and go to school and be educated. And so there was this whole community of couples that were made up of jailers and mulatto women. The other thing, I think when I think about slavery, I'm always thinking about plantations. So I never really opened my mind to the fact that slavery existed in a city like Richmond. And so one of the things that I found is that those who lived in the city, enslaved people were able to hire themselves out, and that their masters trusted them with a note to go stand on the corner and garnish wages, and trusted that they would come back and everything would be okay. I always just picture them picture that part of history just taking place on a plantation. You never left the plantation, and so to see them moving with a little bit of free will was another thing that really surprised me.
I wonder if there were some interesting things that you learned that maybe didn't make it into the book. I mean, in research, there's so many fascinating things, but we can't write 800-page books, that we kind of have to tone it down a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think I'm capable of writing 800 pages. But there was so many fascinating stories. I mean, I caught myself jumping down numerous rabbit holes, and I have to be careful. And I don't know if you feel like this, but sometimes researching is so fun and so delicious that you almost don't want to write. Like you just want to keep learning, you want to keep reading, and you want to go down that rabbit hole, even if you're going away from the story that you want to tell. Sometimes it's the research is as or more rewarding than the actual writing. So that happened to me an awful bit. I had to be very conscious to really focus on slavery in Virginia, because it's going to be very different from New Orleans, from North Carolina, from Maryland. And so when I found stories that were taking me in those different directions, I really had to just kind of bring myself back. I had to bring myself back and say, maybe for another time, maybe this is a story for another time, and just kind of file it away and keep my focus on Virginia.
Yeah. Well, I love the dinner scene with the women, and I could have, how they have DVDs and they have outtakes of the DVDs. I would love to have just an outtake of Phoebe, maybe just meeting with them again, because I just thought it was fabulous. Now, I know we're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but this one is a beauty. And we see all it, and I'm glad you have a poster of it behind you, because we can see some of the elements maybe a bit more. And I wonder if you can talk about some of the, I don't know if we can see it, their photos at the bottom of the cover. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, so when we were designing the cover, I, you know, it was really good that Simon and Schuster really brought me in on the design of the cover, which was amazing. They took my suggestions and we kind of worked back and forth on the cover. So the pictures that you see at the bottom of her dress are really older pictures of what Richmond looked like in the 18 and the 1900s. And I thought that that would really just give the book an extra lift to see that kind of going through her dress. The sewing machine here, now, while she worked in the loom house, the sewing machine also gives the, the notion that she is a seamstress. And then she has on the yellow dress. I will confess though, when I was first thinking about the cover, even though it's called Yellow Wife, I was picturing Phoebe in a red dress because her mother's red calico dress, I just kept picturing that. But every time those covers came back with the red dress, it just didn't work. And so when this one came back, we were able to add a couple of different touches to it and really bring it to life. The other thing that I want to point out is that on the inside of the book, there are these beautiful end pages. And this is actually what the Lumpkins jail looked like in Richmond and the additional outhouses. So this was definitely something that I was glad that we were able to include. This is a picture that I had hanging up on my wall so that as I sat down to write the book, I had a visual. I can kind of look at it and let my brain kind of daydream over what was happening while she was at the jail.
Wow. I have the Canadian edition of the book and it doesn't have the end paper. So that's a pity because that really brings a lot to, it really lets the reader picture where Phoebe is. In your author's note, you mentioned that it was a move that brought you to this story or brought the story to you. Can you talk about Richmond and tell us a little bit about the Richmond slave trail?
Yeah, so I was living in New Jersey. My family, we lived in New Jersey. All my children were born there. And my husband and I had gotten to a point where we were thinking we needed to move. We were outgrowing our home. And I remember standing in my kitchen and I heard this voice that said, you should move, like move, like not down the street, like move. And this was in February. 2 weeks later, we literally looked down the East Coast. My husband and I found ourselves right outside of Richmond. We found a realtor. We were looking at homes. A month later, we came back. We found a home. We were moved in by June. So it all happened really fast and I had no real explanation. It wasn't a job, it wasn't anything that moved us to this area, but it was just a feeling. And so that was June of 2015. By April of 2016, we had some friends from New Jersey come to visit and we took them on the Richmond Slave Trail. And the Richmond Slave Trail is about 2.5 miles. It snakes along the James River and there's 17 markers along the trail. And the markers talk about what it was like for the enslaved people as they came into Richmond. Richmond being number 2 in the slave trading industry behind New Orleans. And so it was fascinating facts, but it was there that the story of Mary Lumpkins found me and the ancestors called to me. And it was like, it was waiting for me. And when I think about that whole moving to Richmond so quickly without really thinking on it, the only thing I could say is that the story was waiting for me and it was meant for me to tell it.
That's really wonderful. We've focused on Yellow Wife tonight, but I'm also curious about your previous book. You said that you said that they're contemporary. Can you talk about the common themes that we might find?
The common themes that you will find through all of my books: love, relationships, family, women who have insurmountable challenges to overcome, what they're like at the beginning, what it feels like as they're going through the growing pains of life, and how they end up on the other side. And that would be the most common theme. I'm working on a 5th novel now, and that is about 2 strong women who have these challenges, that are dealing with motherhood and classism and colorism, but they have to overcome it to get to the other side. And that is what I'm really interested in writing about. I love writing about women. I love telling our stories. I love shining a little flashlight on something that may be unknown, but that we should know about, and just bringing it to life. So
Yes. Oh, well, Thank you so much for this, for our discussion. This is The Yellow Wife. I absolutely loved it, and I just hope everyone will pick it up. It's just a fabulous book, and as Sadeqa says, it's something that we should know about.
Thank you.
Oh, such a great conversation. And you and Janet, you covered all the, I was sitting in the background going, okay, I want to know about this and I want to know about that. And you covered all of that. It was so great because just as I was like, oh, I'll ask about that. And it's like, oh no, you got that covered. Because I loved hearing the what your other books were like, because and was this such a departure for you to go into the historical fiction?
Yes, it really was. It was a jump. It was an act of faith. It was a really different experience for me, but one that I'm better because of. I'm glad that I did it.
Yeah, because that is, it's like sometimes it takes you to the precipice and then it's like something pushes you over and we're all better for it. I missed though, your next one, what time period is your next one set in?
So the novel that I'm working on now, and I'm still in the very beginning stages, but it's going to take place in the 1940s and the 1950s. And it's a cross between Philadelphia, which is where I grew up, and Washington, D.C. So we have two different characters that are working from both places.
Excellent. Well, we do have a question into it. It's Arlene, who always has wonderful questions at our events. It's a two-part question and it's for both of you. So Janet, we're going to start with you for the first part of this one. So Arlene's asking, how deeply do you inhabit your characters and the time period? Does it make it hard to reorient yourself back to the present day reality?
I found writing about real people really challenging, and it took me about 5 years to be able to put words into Dorothy Reeder's mouth. This is the directress of the American Library in Paris during World War II. So I just became obsessed about all of the letters that she wrote. She wrote a confidential report about the occupation, and just right before the occupation. So that was really something that I became obsessed with. And one of the things in my book are the denunciation letters about Jewish people. And so I read those. I spent a lot of time in France's Holocaust Museum. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I did. Looking back on it, I think, wow, I was really depressed. And it is really hard when you see what man will do to man.
Right.
So yes, I think I'm going to take Sadeqa's advice, and I already do write in the morning, but then I just have lunch. But I think having like a physical activity and moving, I think that really helps shake things up and gets you back into your daily life. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, because you did sort of answer that earlier, Sadeqa, about how you kind of immerse yourself, but get out.
Yeah, it's definitely necessary because I probably would have been a bit depressed. I mean, it was a very depressing time in our history if I had stayed in it, but I had to shake it out of my bones. And because I have a middle schooler, she comes in and she's demanding. So I have to like be ready.
Those
I
kids.
have to be ready.
Your brain's got to be like, okay, we got to get into 2020 right now.
That's right. That's right.
But that's the thing too, though. Do you find it hard to get back to that? When you're writing, so you pull yourself out. Do you find it hard to immerse yourself back into the story, or do you jump back in pretty easily? Sadeqa?
For me, I feel like I drop into a portal, particularly for Yellow Wife. That's how it felt. It's like I dropped down into a portal and that I was there. I could see it, I can smell it, I can taste it, I could touch it. And I'm so in that world that when something outside distracts me, it's almost a shocker. Like I remember my 15-year-old daughter bounced in and she just started talking to me and I like jumped in my seat because it was like my body was here, but my everything else was in 1850. So for me, it's like I'm there, and if they pull me out and I go do something, sometimes it's hard to get back to that same space. So I actually have to leave my cell phone downstairs. I have to put myself on restrictions. I can't check my email for at least an hour. I can't get up to go to the bathroom because those little distractions will take me out of the story. Like I have to be fully immersed.
Yeah. Is that the same for you, Janet? It sounds like you pretty much immersed yourself pretty.
Well, the story never leaves me, and I have to say I'm really bad company in real life because you're talking to me, but I'm taking everything you say, and I'm like, how can this work in my book? So
Yeah. I love that. Like, we had the honor of interviewing John Grisham over the summer, and he actually writes on a computer that's not connected to the internet in any way. He is in a little,
idea.
yeah, in a little like house off his house. It's like no outside distractions at all. It's basically a word processor, which I think you probably, because there's just so many, you hear the binging your phone or you see your email pop up. It's just like there's so many things to pull us out. Okay, let's get back to Janet's second part of her question. It's actually a three-parter. Nice job. Arlene. Thanks, Arlene. Okay, so this one is, what sustains you in your writing process, and what do you do to take a break when you're too immersed in the characters or the scene? So, Sadeqa, I think you've talked, but do you have other kind of things that you do to give yourself a break?
I, I think that's probably my biggest breaks. The running, the hiking. I just started listening to audiobooks while I'm out and about. So while I'm hiking or I'm running, the audiobook, that story will take me away from my story and put me someplace else. So that also helps. I really like to run to like really hard hip hop music because that thump, all of that thumping also takes me out of myself. So I need something to take me out of that space and take me out of myself so that when I'm done, I'm drenched, I take all that stuff off, and now it's like, okay, Sadeqa's back.
Sadeqa's back. Mom's back. She can be distracted.
Yes. What's for dinner?
What's for dinner, Mom? How about you, Janet? Do you have anything that you do to kind of help you get back to normal life?
I think when sometimes I take a manuscript as far as I can, and then I'll give it to a friend to read. And just having that break for a week or two, I think that really helps. And then I can go back to it refreshed.
And I love this last part of her question. And we'll start with you, Janet, on this one. What did you learn about yourself in writing your current published book?
Oh, I'm insane. I'm just nuts. I mean, how can you just write, a book for 10 years and have no, I don't know. And I think my husband is really nice because he never questioned my sanity. I mean, you go to work every day and you don't know what will happen. You don't know if because my first agent and my first editor rejected the book. So I had to start all over with the process, and you just don't know. And so it was just kind of being relentless. I don't think I knew how relentless I was. My parents have always told me I was, but never say die is what my dad says about me. So I guess this process just confirmed what they've always said.
It was a confirmation.
Yes.
It wasn't so much you learned, it was more of a confirmation.
Yeah.
How about you, Sadeqa?
I was going to say, Janet, to me, it sounds like that you stepped out on faith, and relentless is definitely the word that I would use. For me, it was that I am more powerful than I know. I did not think I was capable of writing this story. And when I get the feedback of how much people enjoyed it and related to it, and even though it's a difficult part of history, people have called it beautiful and breathtaking and all of these wonderful words. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like it almost feels like I didn't do it. So it's like I feel more powerful than I know, which I think is a good thing as a writer. If we're too confident, then the soup's not going to come out right. Mm-hmm. So we have to approach it with awe and wonder, and know that there's a magic recipe there that we have to uncover, or otherwise it's probably not going to be good. So it's better that I learned that after the book is out in the world and doing its thing.
Right. Almost every author that I've ever talked to says that it's like the ones and ones that you talk to that are super confident, like, oh, I don't need any editing. This is the best thing I've ever written. It's like, oh, beware. Because usually the good stuff comes from everybody that's like, I didn't think I could write this. Oh my God, I was so nervous about it. Yeah. And those are usually like the best stories. So we're about out of time. So thank you again, both of you, so much. Janet, So 10 years for this one. Are we going to wait 10 years for the next
Oh,
one?
I
or-
hope not. I hope I can stay with the same team. I hope they'll want me, but you never know. You just never know. That's what's hard about publishing.
But you are working on
I-
something right now.
Oh, I'm doing some research. Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
Oh,
Well, we
I'm
can't wait to hear.
excited, Janet. I
Oh,
loved the Paris Library so
Oh,
much.
thank
It
you.
kept me company, and it was just such a breath of fresh air.
Thank you, Sadeqa.
So it's wonderful. And Sadeqa, for you, I always love this one. It's like somebody's, we're talking about this book and we talked about your last one. So it's like, we know the next one's coming, but is it coming, you think 2022 or 2023 probably?
Well, we're just in talks now
Okay.
with the publisher, so we shall see. I am only, I'm only in the second draft, and
Okay.
I'll just say, like, Yellow Wife is about 8 drafts.
Okay.
So I have a ways to go.
We got you on that.
I have a ways to go. Yeah.
It's so funny because I think that, people, they read about it's like, when's the next one coming? And it's like, there's a process. There's some germinating that needs to happen.
The best thing for me is when people say, oh, I read your book in one sitting. Where's the next one? And I'm like, well, that was 3 years of my life that you read in a few hours.
Right. And it's like, I guess that's a compliment. It's a compliment, but then it's like, oh, you could have sat a little bit longer with that.
But it's really wonderful because I wish I could write as fast as they can read. That's the
Yeah.
one thing. That's
Right.
all.
Yeah. I
But
agree.
but ladies, it's worth the wait. So
Oh, thank you.
we will wait. So with that, I am going to say goodnight to Facebook and to all of us everybody that's watching out there. Thank you again, Warwick's. Check out our website. We have lots of other great events coming up, and keep your eyes peeled for more wonderful things from these two wonderful authors. So thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good
Good
Have a
night.
good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.